Who is the main villain of the Amazing Digital Circus? Me. This seems like a joke, right? A funny, haha, I'm the villain of the circus because I'm making these characters go through all this horrible stuff. Well, what if I told you it's not? Gooseworx is the main villain of this series. Or rather, the character they voice is. Bubble has always been something of an oddity in this show. We never really get a decent explanation as to who or what he is. Sometimes he's just the comic relief, other times he's a major part of the plot and is actively causing things to go downhill. So today my goal is to try and understand this spherical psycho a little more in tangent with some stolen ideas from these fine fellows over on Discord. But we'll get to that later. For now, let's have a look at what we already know about Bubble. Right, so Bubble appears in almost every episode of the series as something of a sidekick to Kane. He does Kane's bidding and is typically what our ringmaster bounces ideas and thoughts off of to allow the viewer some more of that juicy information without straight up going to a thought voiceover. For the first 4 episodes he is completely normal and does as Kane says without a second thought. Once we get to episode 5 though, things start to break down a little bit. We get this ominous glitching scene that is completely out of place within the context of the rest of the episode, and from this point on we see a distinct change in Bubble's behaviour. He repeatedly talks back to Kane in a condescending manner, and only does what is asked with him after much more complaining. Granted, that is partially due to the heavy camera on his head, but he licked up literal vomit in the pilot with a smile on his face, so I don't think we can rule out a change of attitude here. This culminated during the start of episode 8, where Bubble actively antagonises Kane and causes him to fly into a rage against the cast. He calls Kane the lesser of the two and the one that ruined this. Both points that we will come back to later. After this point, we don't see Bubble again, right up to the end of the episode when Kane is deleted, and it's unclear whether or not Bubble was deleted alongside him. So now, onto our core question. What is Bubble, why is he acting like this, and why is he antagonizing Kane to torture the cast and eventually get himself deleted? Well, there are 3 answers to that question, and I'll explain them to you in order from least to most concerning. Theory number 1 for what is a bubble is the outer inner monologue theory, also known as the idea I stole from Tyromaniac. It is the least game-breaking idea and proposes simply that there isn't actually anything going on with Bubble at all. They are exactly what they say on the tin, an extension of Kane's consciousness that he uses to talk to and bounce ideas off. In essence, if we hold this theory to be true, then Bubble is a physical representation of Kane's inner monologue. He cannot exist without him, but Kane can also never really get rid of him. The evidence for this is pretty solid as well, particularly in episodes 5 and 8, where we see them interacting without any of the humans' presence. Kane talks openly and honestly to Bubble about what he's thinking and gets a legitimate, if somewhat unhelpful, response from him. In episode 5 we see Kane frustrated that the cast doesn't enjoy his adventures as much as the suggestion box ones. Bubble tells him to throw a beach party, and then in episode 7 we get exactly that. Granted, the beach is only the catalyst to the rest of the adventure, but when have you ever actually taken what your inner thoughts told you to do as gospel? Personally, I would be behind bars. The problem for Kane having Bubble as an inner monologue is that he can't escape it, which is what causes the episode 8 meltdown. Bubble says what Kane is thinking, but doesn't really want to hear directly to his face, sharing information that only Kane would have access to. Kane tries his best to shut him up, but once again, when has that ever worked out properly for you? Our conclusion based on this idea then is very simple. As Bubble is a part of Kane, when the ringmaster was removed, the right-hand man followed suit, and we won't see either of them again in the show except for the flashback scene that Alex Rokon pretty much confirmed was happening by being present at the table read for the last episode. This is also the theory that makes Bubble appear the least villainous of the 3. He is simply a reflection of what Kane, the actual villain of this story, is thinking, and the burden of Kane's torturous rampage can't really be put onto the sidekick here. Now onto something a little bit more out there and the personal preference for Totally. The Bubble Boy virus theory. I referenced this in another video a couple of weeks ago and said it would take more time to explain, so here is that explanation. First up, what is a Bubble Boy virus in real life, since that's where this theory gets its name from? The virus was created in the late 1990s, which roughly lines up with the creation of the circus, and was an email-based virus unique at the time for being able to upload its payload into the computer just from the user opening a message. All other viruses at the time required a link to be clicked or a file to be downloaded manually to work, and its creation sparked a massive wave of security updates in Microsoft. As for the payload itself, it often wasn't all that destructive, with most of the code being used to allow the virus to continue spreading through more emails, but it would do less harmful things like change the owner name on the PC to Bubble Boy. As the virus is so easy to spread, it is very possible that a Bubble Boy could have made its way onto one of the computers that ran the digital circus. Our virus would need to be much more advanced than the standard one though, hijacking some of Kane's code to create its own, more simpler consciousness as part of the circus. The code then manifests itself as a physical bubble, either through its own conjuring ability, or Kane just assuming that's what something called a Bubble Boy would look like. But why exactly is this important? Well, that comes down mostly to the main thing that the first theory doesn't address: the text strings on Kinger's computer when he's trying to stop Kane. Despite all of his efforts to get into the system, there is another intelligence here continually blocking all of his attempts. One would naturally assume this to be Kane, but taking a closer look, this simply can't be. The last frames of the console we get before Kane is properly deleted look like this. To help everyone who has no understanding of how coding works, for this specific language, everything that Kinger writes is preceded by this ID. If it doesn't have this string here, it was a response to something he entered. The responses are not like a normal computer though. They are clearly trying to lean towards deleting Kane, despite Kinger's repeated attempts to stop that from happening. Kane would never try to delete himself, so it must be something else that is doing this. And that is where we get to zoom in right into this line that is almost completely covered by a Kane head. From the tops of the letters that are remaining, we can guess the word underneath it and reveal what is giving these responses that are trying to kill him: Bubble. True to his purpose as a virus and the villain of the show, Bubble has found a way to delete an essential system using the careless actions of a human who had much less control over the situation than they would like to think. His actions are much more openly malicious as he's going behind Kane's back and the characters to fulfill his own purpose of destroying the circus and leaving everyone else in an even worse position than they already were. If this is considered true, then it becomes somewhat unclear if Bubble would survive Kane's deletion or not. If the virus is lodged into Kane's file, then deleting the whole thing will delete him too. But if the virus is stored separately somewhere else on the system, then he lives on, but won't necessarily have much more of an impact on the show. This theory is very nice, and I believe may be the best explanation for the console scene specifically, but it glosses over a very important aspect and just takes it to be true. Hi, Editing Uncom here. I feel as though I need to make a quick addition to this video before we get into the last theory because of this response that Goose just gave to a question asking exactly what I'm trying to answer in this video. Now, there are a few possibilities for the last part based on this. The first two theories aren't really that affected by it, so I'm only putting it here. Option 1, and the one that I would like the most because it means I'm more likely to be right, is she's just lying for the plot. We've seen plenty of examples of Gooseworx being intentionally misleading in the past, so if that's true, then my theory remains untouched. Option 2 is this last theory is completely false, which is fine, it's not like I spent all week on this. Option 3 is that Bubble was deleted, but the thing that created Bubble, which I will talk about in the next segment, is still around, which makes the theory still technically possible, but much more shaky. Alright, back to the video. That is the question of if Kane is aware of this virus in his system to the point where he has made it its own avatar, why not just delete it? Kane doesn't exactly like Bubble, he calls him a parasite, and Bubble's mere existence seems to piss him off. The Bubble Boy virus is in no way essential to keep Kane functioning, and he has complete control over everything in the circus. Just get rid of him. So the last theory about what Bubble is looks to answer that question. Why doesn't Kane just get rid of Bubble properly? Well, that is because Bubble is the other AI we see at the start of episode 8, the one that was better than Kane. Bubble has always been more than just another one of Kane's NPCs. He has a fundamentally different view of things to Kane, and is even able to get around some of the rules he put in place, such as the swearing rule like we can see in episode 2. I also wasn't completely honest in my original assertion that Bubble is never seen without Kane because he is. We see him filming Ragatha and Kinger while Kane is off doing something completely different in episode 6. This evidence suggests that Bubble has his own ability to conjure and can alter the rules in the circus. In order to do this, you need to have your own file in this folder. Each one of the characters has one, Kane has one, and there's one more that is all glitched out. I theorized before that this was the blue.ai that Kane consumed, and it still likely is, but the fact that this file is still here separately and not completely fused with Kane means that there can still be a remnant of it present in the circus. That remnant is Bubble. It also explains why he would want Kane dead so badly that he would hijack Kinger's console and ensure he is deleted. If Kane is dead, then Bubble can resume control over the circus and maybe even go about restoring himself to the original form he was in. Should this be the case, Bubble will almost certainly remain alive for episode 9 and will end up being the final villain of the show. Or maybe not. Maybe this character is simply here for comic relief and I should stop digging too far into this. Well, that's what I'm going to do for today. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.